Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel for a new episode of a series I have not done in a while, which is if you like this, you might like this YA to adult literature edition. So I've done a few of these in the past, although like I said, not for a while, where I take some popular YA books or just YA books that I really enjoyed and recommend to you an adult equivalent, something that I think you would also enjoy if you're trying to get into adult literature. But equally, this is not about saying one age demographic is better than the other. Both YA and adult literature can do phenomenal things, and I love all of the books in this video. So if you've read the adult book and enjoyed the adult book, you may very well want to go and check out the YA book, and it works like that as well. I actually polled you all on my Instagram stories to see which video you wanted to see next, and this one definitely won, but it was a close call. All of the other videos I asked if you'd like to see, there was 4 in total, came very close. So I'll insert a screenshot here of the videos I was thinking of filming, and if you'd like to let me know which one you'd like me to film next, that would be incredibly helpful, because I obviously want to create the content for you that you most want to see, and I do want to film all of these videos. It might just take me a while. So yeah, if you want to let me know your priority and the one that you're most interested in, let me know. But for now, let's have a look at the YA to adult book recommendations. So first up, we're going down the horror route with Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. So this is naturally a horror book. It's a YA novel about a group of friends who lost one of their member about a year ago. So one of the friends in this friendship group is our protagonist, and her sister went missing a year ago. Nobody knows what happened to her, and after her sister went missing, their friendship group fell apart somewhat, so they're not as tight-knit as they used to be, until they're pulled into this dangerous and mysterious game. Everyone in their school gets sent this text suggesting that they go to this bit of the woods that has a haunted ghost story surrounding it and play this traditional ghost game that everyone in their town knows about. But it turns out not to be a game, and they end up stumbling into a genuinely terrifying other world where no one is safe. I loved that in this book the stakes were very real. You cannot be assured going into this book that everyone is going to be safe, and it was just such a captivating story about a really interesting group of people. There was LGBTQ+ representation, and yeah, all in all, just a really genuinely creepy horror novel regardless of age demographic, which is something that I can also say for my adult recommendation, which is The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. So this is an adult horror novel which also plays with the idea of another world that is potentially posing a threat to the humans in this world. It's about a young woman whose grandmother has recently died, and she has been sent to clean up her grandmother's home. It turns out her grandmother was a massive hoarder, which she didn't realise because she hadn't visited her in a long time. They were not on good terms. So it's a huge undertaking that she wasn't really fully prepared for, and she must spend quite a lot of time there. Something worse than a messy hoarder house, however, definitely lurks around the corner. She starts to hear slightly creepy noises during the night, as if maybe something is out there in the woods surrounding this house, and she discovers an old diary that belonged to her grandfather, which at first sound like the ramblings of someone losing their mind in old age, but then start to line up with some of the things that our protagonist is experiencing in the here and now, including this incredibly creepy phrase which includes the words "the twisted ones" that get stuck in your head, and it gets stuck in the protagonist's head, but it also gets stuck in your head, and it's really unnerving. This is one of those ones where there's something out there in the dark and you never know when it's going to appear. You felt incredibly on edge and jumpy whilst reading this book, but it's so absorbing that you cannot put it down, and there is definitely some really interesting twists and turns to the story, and in that sense it feels very in line with the horror in Rules for Vanishing. So these are both books I absolutely adored and would highly recommend. We then move on to a feminist YA dystopian novel, which is Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill. So this is a book set at a school or an orphanage, an institution where girls are raised in order to fulfill their role in society. And these girls have spent their entire lives at this institution since birth, and there's definitely something eerie and strange surrounding that and how they came to be in the world that this is set in, because it is a futuristic novel where the world is a little bit different, although it very much plays on contemporary themes. And we follow one of the students at this school who is being trained up for one of the 3 purposes that women fulfill in this world. It's a really excellent work of YA feminist literature, and one that's actually quite creepy and quite dark. I will also point out that there are trigger warnings in this for eating disorders, which may not be for all readers. The one I wanted to recommend to you based on this, however, for adults is Madam by Phoebe Wen. Now, this is an interesting comparison because this book is not set in the future, it's actually set in the past. It's set in 1992, the year I was born, yes, I know. But it is set at an all-girls boarding school in rural Scotland. We follow a new teacher, a classics teacher, who has gotten a position at this school in order to teach these young girls who are from the most elite stratospheres of society, the richest of the rich. But when she gets there, it feels like there's much more to the school than one might traditionally assume from even the most elite boarding school. There is something else at play, and there are purposes to these girls' education that she as a teacher has not been let in on yet. It is absolutely fascinating. It very much plays on the themes of the traditional Gothic, but brings it to a slightly more contemporary setting, like I said, the 1990s, and it very much feels like a feminist novel that also draws on contemporary themes despite being set in the past. So different novels in a lot of ways, but novels that very much reminded me of each other, and I both think again are really, really good. Just to keep the variety going, I then have a fantasy novel, and this is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. This is a YA retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It is one of my favourite Beauty and the Beast retellings, although I'm a massive sucker for this specific fairy tale retelling. I can't exactly pinpoint why I'm so drawn to it, but I love them and I've read quite a few. This one, however, does some really interesting things because our Beauty character, the one that fulfills that role in the fairy tale, is actually from our contemporary world. She comes from a household where her mum is really ill and her brother might be involved in something slightly illegal, so her life is not an easy one, but she ends up getting pulled into another realm, into a fantasy world where this prince is trying to break a curse upon him. Now, of course, we have the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale parallels there, but I loved that kind of blending of contemporary female protagonist with what feels like more of a medieval-esque fantasy world, and how Harper, our protagonist, refuses to be anything other than the incredible modern young woman that she is. Harper is also disabled, she has cerebral palsy, and it affects her movement and the pain that she experiences on an everyday basis, but this is not one of those stories where her disability is cured in a fantasy world. This is just part of who she is, and it's so wonderful to read, particularly a YA book aimed at a younger audience that depicts an incredibly strong and vivid protagonist who just happens to be disabled, and I think that's wonderful. The adult book I wanted to recommend on the back of this is Entreat Me by Grace Draven. I've already mentioned that I've read quite a few Beauty and the Beast retellings. I absolutely love the subgenre. Let me know if you'd like a dedicated video to that, but Entreat Me is one of my absolute favourites. It definitely hones in on the romance side of Beauty and the Beast, but it also has some twists and turns that you don't necessarily expect from a Beauty and the Beast retelling. In this book we actually have 2 couples, so there's some interesting parallels there. We have a young man who goes into the village, falls in love with a young woman and takes her home with him, so we have the sort of traditional fairy tale narrative there. But this young woman has a much older half-sister who refuses to let her sister go unchaperoned to this man's house, even if he is this rich lord or whatever he is, and decides to go with her. When she gets there, she is introduced to this young man's father, who she ends up striking up a bit of a flirtation with, and our protagonists are actually the older sister and the father, which is so nice to see. It's so nice to see a romance narrative about 2 characters who are more closely in their middle ages than young 20-somethings. They're also both a widow and a widower, so they're characters who come from previous relationships, who have experienced previous relationships, the good and the bad. They're not new to this whole realm of love and flirtation, and it's really, really nice to see because it's so, so rare. Obviously there is the fantastical elements, the Beauty and the Beast element, and I don't want to give away how they play into the story or what the relationship between those 2 narratives is. Just trust me, it's phenomenally done. I love the protagonists, I love their repartee and their flirtatious banter. They feel so believable, and that's something that Grace Draven does consistently in all of her fantasy romance novels. Lastly, I want to suggest to you a book on the back of Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. So this is a YA thriller that ekes into the YA horror genre. There is a blend of both genres in here. But the premise is we follow a teenage girl named Margot who has a strained relationship with her mother. She doesn't know anything about her family outside of her mother. It's always just been the two of them, and she's getting fed up of this. So she manages to find a clue to who her mother's mother might be, her grandmother, and once she's able to get in contact with this side of her family, decides to run off to live with her grandmother in another part of rural America in this town where her family clearly used to be quite wealthy and own a lot of farmland, although everything isn't as wonderful as it once was. And when she arrives there, something really tragic happens. I won't tell you what it is, but it definitely starts the ball rolling with a slightly darker storyline than Margot was expecting to get. And the book I wanted to recommend to you that is an adult equivalent for this is a adult thriller. It's not so much a horror novel, but it's definitely a thriller, and it's one that I kept drawing parallels to in my head when I was reading this, which is Nook Girls by Amy Engel. So this is a thriller with two parallel timelines. We have a timeline set in the recent past, and we have our contemporary timeline, both of which follow a young woman who again has a strained relationship with her family. She grew up with her mother, but ended up going to live with her grandparents when she was still a teenager, and her cousin who also lived there. But something happened back then during that wonderful summer where she lived with her grandparents and her cousin that caused her to run away and identify more with her mother and what her mother's experience was of this small town. We follow both that time period when she's going to live with her grandparents and her cousin, and also, like I said, the contemporary timeline when she has gone back to her grandparents' home because her cousin has gone missing, and she has to explore and face up to what happened a decade or so ago, as well as get wrapped up in the mystery of what happened to her cousin. I think you can hear from both of those synopses that there is already parallels there, but they're both unique storylines. I just think if you like the narrative and the themes and the pacing of this book, you'll probably very much like Nook Girls. So those are my YA to adult book recommendations. I hope you enjoyed this. It was fun coming back to this concept because, like I said, I haven't done it in a while, but I really enjoy filming them. But if you would like, please do leave me below any requests for YA books that you've enjoyed that you would like an adult recommendation for, because I may be able to provide one in the comments as well. Until next time though, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone!